This is Damon Fordham, adjunct professor of history at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. And I'm here to talk this morning about the recent case in Florida where they have determined that in the social studies standards, they will teach about the skills that people learned during American slavery. And of course, which sort of, if you look at the actual standards, which you can download online, they're trying to put somewhat of a positive spin on this. And come on, people. Every now and then I get people asking me questions about good slave owners and, well, they weren't all that bad as slave owners and so forth. Bottom line is this. No one in their right mind wants to be enslaved. It's just simple as that. And people don't often ask qualifying questions like that about the Nazi Holocaust or the forced removal of Native Americans or anything like that. So a lot of times people use things like this as a deflection. Well, here's the fact of the matter, folks. A lot of people fear that in the teaching of this, that this history of slavery will repeat itself again because people will think that it's not all that bad. Here's what you do about that. Fortunately for us, a lot of people who lived the slavery experience wrote about their experiences. People such as Harriet Jacobs talked about what enslavement was like for a woman in North Carolina back in the 1800s. The great Frederick Douglass, of course, wrote his series of autobiographies on the subject very eloquently. And by the way, Frederick Douglass's descendants now are working to deal with the international aspects of the slave trade to this very day. So, but back in the 1930s, under President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, you had what was known as the Works Progress Administration. And one of their jobs was to go and find that elderly generation of ex-slaves that were dying out and write down their stories. And fortunately for us, a lot of those stories have been captured in books such as Bullwhip Days, The Slaves Remember, which collects some of these interviews, as well as Lay My Burden Down, A Folk History of Slavery, that was edited by B.A. Botkin. And many states, including my own, South Carolina, collected them in various books regarding these slave narratives and stories about slavery. Now, I know some of you are saying, but Professor Fordham, people aren't going to read books like that. Okay, so here's the thing. Number one, things like that, for those of you who are not inclined to pick up a book, these things are available on the Library of Congress website, loc.gov. You can look these stories up on there under the heading of the slave narratives. Also, there are recordings of these interviews that are also on YouTube. Again, look up the WPA, Works Progress Administration Slave Narratives, and you will see them there. So there's the information for you. Now, this is really important because you see, not only do you have things like this going on where they're trying to soften slavery, there are people on YouTube and the internet who are trying to tell young African Americans that slavery was a myth in the first place and that we didn't come from Africa, all this kind of stuff. And that's very dangerous because we have so many young people of this generation with no guidance. So I challenge those of you who are trained historians who know this stuff to go out there and reach out to the average Jane and the average Joe and put these things out there in a language that they could understand so that these young people will be equipped to do what I tell my students are the 3 F's: fight the foolishness with the facts. This is Damon Fordham.